Welcome to another episode of Open Up the Industry with CoolerNathi. I'm hermanus-madumo, and as you well know, our focus for the month of August is on the voice of the woman in the workplace. Today we're joined by none other than Dr Mpume. Dr Mpume is a gynecologist, she is an obstetrician and a sexologist. Welcome Dr Mpume, it's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, how are you?
I'm very well, yourself? So for Abangazi, who is Dr Mpume?
So I am a Zulu girl from rural KZN in the South Coast. I am a mom to a 9-year-old daughter. I'm a daughter. I've got 3 sisters, and I basically studied in Natal, moved up to Joburg to start work and do my postgrad.
Okay, so 3 whole sisters. That must have been interesting.
Very, very much. Well, my dad did make sure that we get one boy, at least with the last born, so.
Okay,
yeah.
All right, great, all right. And so tell us, what was the reason you chose to specialize in gynecology and obstetrics?
So I've always loved this idea of conversations with women, but where it really kind of had that aha moment was I was doing my community service at Baragwanath Hospital.
Okay.
I was in the Department of Obs and Gynae,
Yes.
and I sat at a clinic with a woman who was pregnant, and I so happened to be pregnant myself.
Yes.
And I remember her going on about all the ins and ahs of her pregnancy, and all I could say was, me too, me too. And it was at that moment I realized the only difference between her and I was that I just done a little bit of time at medical school, and I understand all the things that we are going through during our pregnancies or what our bodies are doing, and was able to have like a real girl chat with her about it.
So you knew the science,
Absolutely.
you know, and she was just having this experience.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I've never looked back.
Oh, wonderful. Great, great. Okay, so if you look at the current state of women's health versus some, say, 8-10 years ago, how would you compare it? Have we progressed, and in which ways have we done so?
Yeah, definitely. We definitely have progressed. Something that I've noticed and I really like is that women are more open about what they want, who they want to be treated by. We are not there, obviously, and I think something that is always of concern is sometimes policy doesn't match what's happening in real life. But what I've really enjoyed is women are stepping up and saying, this is how we want to be treated, and they're demanding what they want.
Yeah, great, great. And what's the one question that you get asked a lot in your consultations? Like that one question where you're like,
Just
oh
one?
my gosh.
I thought you'd say like, okay, top one, well, the one that next to that is people ask, how many times should I be having sex a week?
Oh
what
my
is
gosh.
normal per month?
Okay.
But that's not the commonest one. The commonest one actually is women just want to know, am I okay? Am I okay? And it really always leaves me with the sense of we do need to work on that idea of we are enough. We are beautiful, we are gorgeous, and we are enough. And yes, there is an important aspect of looking after ourselves, which is part of going to a gynae and being attended to. But the biggest part, it sits more at our emotional state as to, are we enough? And my answer is always, of course, yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And I mean, you radiate it. So I think, you know, when your patients walk in here, they just feel like, gosh, you know, this is achievable.
That's the beauty, and I speak for myself, of being a woman and looking after women, because I know what it feels like. I know what it feels like to get out of bed and be like, I don't want to do this, and have to, you know, go to work anyway. I know what PMS feels like. I know what period pains feel like. And so when you say me too, somebody's like, okay, we are in this together.
But honestly, Dr. Mpume, a lot of women speak about it in the opposite way. They like, women are just like, toughen up. I know PMS, you know, so you look at it in a more positive view, whereas a lot of women, gynaes will say, oh, come on, I've had a baby, this can't not that bad, just push kind of thing. So you're looking at it more on a positive note, I must say.
I'm a great believer that what you see in the next person or how you is simply what already exists in you. If you are not kind to yourself, it is highly unlikely that you'll be kind to someone else. And so it's important to look at both sides and say, when we have been harsh on one another, it's probably because we ourselves are not kind to ourselves.
Hurt people. Yeah. And talking about the way that women are open with their issues, have you really seen a change in that? Are people just coming out and speaking?
Well, not entirely.
Yeah.
Look, the one thing that I find I work with it a lot is that the more we have been more affluent, the more we have been empowered, the more we can explore further in the conversation. So whilst people are still struggling to just come through and say, I want to have more sex, my libido is low, you'll find that somebody will actively go and look for help and say, I need to see a gynae. And that's where the two must then match up in terms of you as the practitioner ask the right questions. The person has made the effort to get to your doorstep, whereas before we just never used to until or unless something was seriously wrong or pregnant. You know, so for the well woman where there's nothing wrong, it's just a routine checkup. I call that self-love. And so for me, I use that as an opportunity to say, you're already here, we might as well talk about it all.
Let's get into it.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're living very highly stressful lives, you know. How is that impacting our health? What are you seeing, you know, in your consultation rooms?
Top three things that I am genuinely concerned about: irregular periods, right? A lot of thrush or candida, as well as very painful period pains, like beyond normal. But also something that sits a little bit at the back is struggling to conceive. I'm not watering down or taking away when there's actually a serious problem and sitting behind it. There's a serious gynae issue. But for the most part, the skipping periods, bad period pains, that is definitely related to lifestyle. Stressful lifestyle. We don't look after ourselves. We don't sleep enough. We are almost addicted to the hustle. There's nothing wrong with working, but it should never be at the cost of who we are. We must look after ourselves so that we can give off the very best of what we have and who we are. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, we'll get into that, a little bit more into that. But choice is something that we have, and you've spoken a little bit about that. But we are being allowed choices that our mothers didn't necessarily have. The choice to have children or not have children, the choice to delay or postpone having children. How would you guide a woman through that kind of decision?
Look, Khonze, it's still a little bit of a difficulty, and here is why. We are being taught a lot about choice and the responsibility that comes with a choice, but I think what hasn't quite matched is, as individuals, we come from homes, we come from societies, we come from cultural backgrounds, we come from something typical about our own country, and so sometimes our choice does not necessarily match what is societally acceptable. And what I've really loved about the movement or the move of women lately is that insistent we're not rebelling against society, we're simply saying, but that's not who we are. This is who I am. And so choice becomes a really powerful thing when you can match it together with responsibility. And I think we're seeing that the wheels of change come through.
Yeah.
So how I guide them is, especially, don't think we're going to start tough conversations when we are old. So particularly for women, I say and encourage, when you look at the younger generation, the upcoming generation, our children, start the conversations early. I strongly believe that's why our parents struggled so much with having, conversations about sex, about our bodies, about contraception, about whatever that is seen as taboo. It's because we didn't cultivate the simple conversations when we were much younger. If there's anything you can give to our children as women, talk. Talk. If you can't talk, find someone, an auntie,
do whatever.
Find someone who can help you learn to talk and be genuine and authentic in your conversations with whoever, your kids, your sisters, your colleagues, your friends. I think the one thing that is really wearing away is us being authentic about who we are and what we really go through.
I agree. I mean, we're hearing in the news lately, a lot of resistance about sex education in schools. And people feel that, children are being sent to school to learn about math, science, and whatever. And, sex should not be a topic that they speak on. What's your view on that?
I'm concerned because for me that reflects a lot of maybe intellectual quotient that is out there, but emotional intelligence is something that we don't work on very well. And remember, when we send our children to school, yes, it's partly to learn about maths and science and become a professional in something, but it should not take away from you are a growing human being and
a
whole being, and that comes with what your characters, your values, making decisions, doing life. Maths is not life. You know, science is a bit of life, a lot of life, but day-to-day life is not about maths and science. It is about how we interact with one another. It is about how I feel, how confident I am, my identity, and what I then project towards someone else, and how I treat the next person. I think those things are more important, and they don't get the same kind of praise as maths and science.
I agree, absolutely. I mean, I think that really talks to psychology, which I really think would be a great subject to have from primary school onwards, but well, that's a topic for another day. So we spoke about choice. Abortion is still highly stigmatized. No matter how much you read on the Twitter streets, people saying this is just a simple procedure. It's still highly stigmatized.
Yeah.
What are your views on that?
I think abortion has been used a lot as a tool to dehumanize other human beings. When you stop seeing someone as a human being who is going through whatever they're going through, and they are making the best choices for themselves, we err on the side of calling names, and it just gives people permission to treat other people with less than human. And so for me, it's sad. I think it's just sad, and it tells me a lot about where people are in terms of growth and really being able to step into someone else's shoe, because unless you've sat across and listened to every single woman's story, not that you need a soppy story for somebody or somebody to explain themselves why they're choosing what they're choosing, but we really haven't understood the some of the struggles and just the human spirit of the next person.
Yes. Okay, enough of the heavy stuff. I think we've done a lot of heavy lifting. Let's move on to the sexology part of things. So tell us, what is sexology? Is it a degree? Gunama modules? Like, what is sexology?
I actually got introduced to sexology, yes, by virtue of being a gynecologist. When I would see patients, I was curious to what's your sex life like, and not because out of just curiosity, but because I genuinely believe if somebody can be physically healthy, but if they're not okay, if I'm not having great sex, or if the relationship is not going well, and a lot of women, that comes through in the consultations. And I quickly noticed that in our curriculum as gynecologists, I mean, there is one chapter in our book on sexual health and sexual function, and yet so much of just who we are, our cyclical beings, affects how we are. I mean, in the first 3 weeks of the month or of your cycle, we are all good beings, and we are out there, and then they call us names in the last week just for our period, and that for me was fascinating. So I got introduced, but I quickly learned in the program of sexology that it is such a huge topic that gets left out a lot. It's about sexual function. It's about when things are not going so well in the sexual health, and it varies because it does touch on the issues like health from a safety perspective, infections and so on, but also just from a pleasure perspective, which is often sort of sidelined. The importance of pleasure, the importance of the changes that happen with our bodies as we grow older. What is normal, what isn't, who defines the normal, and so I had a great privilege of being able to go to the School of Sexual Medicine in Europe 2018.
Okay.
And so I'm writing my final fellowship in January, which is amazing. But for me, all there is to it is I think it's such an important aspect of our health, and very few people are comfortable talking about it. And I'm definitely right up there.
Yeah, and I mean, as psychology, our makeup, I mean, if you go to couples therapy, the first thing they ask you, are you guys having sex? Because that's going to tell you what's going on in this relationship.
Yeah.
So that's quite important. And then speaking about periods and that, there's a contentious issue, that's kind of bubbling up. The question is, does period leave move us forward as women? There are people that would say period leave is distractionary from women's liberation, whereas some people would say it's progressive. Which way do you sit on that?
I think as long as we are progressing, the progression must also incorporate the understanding of who we are. I think, it's like the whole concept of asking a fish to climb a tree. You are working against the natural function and productivity of that species. And I think as women, when you look at how we are functionally built from, in terms of our psychical beings, in terms of our hormones, in terms of how we are in the first, like I said, three weeks of the month, and then the last one, it doesn't make sense how we get into the workspace and try and function exactly the same way as the other species, And so for me, part of being progressive, it cannot deny who we are. And on that note, it's I think it would be a very progressive thing. And it doesn't mean period leave doesn't mean you don't work, and it doesn't equal being lazy. It says I will work with my strengths so that I can bring out the best of who I am. So whether you're working from home, whether you're taking light duties, whatever that works with your natural makeup so that you give off the best of yourself. That for me is progress, and that for me speaks to a woman rather than an ideology that we are being dragged to identify with.
Yes. And I mean, I guess the challenge would be we're all so different. So, some people it's 3 weeks, for some it's 2 weeks, and how do we then find that balance? What would it look like? What would this period leave look like?
Look, I mean, that's why I said, we'd have to define what leave is, because it might, like I said, it might not be necessarily just working from home. But I think I love what we post these days on, social media. Know thyself, love thyself, which is really true. But so often I recognize that we don't live it out. We don't live the loving ourselves, because, like I said, part of loving yourself is knowing yourself, getting to know you. I mean, how many women know what's my cycle? Are you a 28-day, 29-day, 30-day? It's like, I don't know. I just wait for it to come. If you understand yourself better, you even if you have to go into the office and deal with the usual, it's a different mindset when you understand where you are in your cycle, because when Jack always irritates you and you can handle him, and suddenly you're like, Jack, not today. Right? And I think particularly for women, it allows us to empathize with one another. It allows us to be kinder to one another, as opposed to spreading the negative, toxic things that we often do, like gossiping and, oh, did you see she's slacking again? And you're like, really? Do you understand? Have you ever been in her? Do you know what it's like to have endometriosis? And so for me, a little more love, a little more kindness.
Go a long way. Hey? Okay, and on sexual pleasure, I think we've mostly been conditioned as women that our function is to please men, So what is women's sexual pleasure, and how do you get to a point as a woman where you recognize that this is where it's at for me?
It's not inside, it's on top. That's the best. 80% of women will have an orgasm or best pleasure from clitoral stimulation, right? And again, let's go back to knowing ourselves. You can't ask somebody to do for you what you can't do for yourself, or what you don't even know. Like, baby, you didn't touch the right button, and when it says, baby, where is it? You don't even know yourself. And I think something that we are impatient with. We're impatient with ourselves. Knowing yourself is a journey. It takes time. Knowing what pleases you as a woman, it takes time, and it is different. You'll find that in your 20s, you wanted something different from intimacy, as opposed to when you were in your 30s, as opposed to when you're in your 40s, as opposed to when you're in your 70s or 80s, because sexual pleasure is whatever you define it to be for yourself at any given time of your life. If it makes you happy, baby, go for it.
There we go. Dr. Mpume has given the permission.
No, you gotta give yourself permission first.
Yes.
And
true.
then I'm like, go for it.
Great. Okay, and to close us off, what's next for Dr. Mpume? What's up? What's on the lineup? What's on the schedule?
Oh my gosh, it is. There's so much stuff that's bubbling under, and I've had to learn to restrain myself. First of all, we are just busy getting our practice in shape, and when I say in shape, in the sense that we are specifically looking at creating the experience for women to walk in, and it must feel like walking into a spa.
Oh, I love
and the real, if I can call it, the real thing behind that is we want to serve women. So from the practice to the conversations we'll start having, and I mean, you don't want to reveal too much.
Yes, so watch
but
this
there's definitely a lot of great stuff that caters particularly to women, and hopefully in the way and the manner that women will be like, thank God somebody
like
gets
it.
it.
It absolutely sounds like it. Oh, wow. Well, I'm blown away. I hope you are too. That was CoolerNathi. I'm hermanus-madumo. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Mpume. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Francis.